Hello, everybody, and welcome to what may or may not be the Prestige Reef Dork show. Tonight, this is potentially just the Sunday night Reef Dork live stream because Ryan has a bit of an emergency. I'll come back onto that in a sec because it doesn't matter that Ryan's not here because I've got a better guest.
A substitute.
That is Jeremy Gay from Reef Builders. Jeremy, how are you?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for inviting me on the show. I like the intro. That was like a proper TV intro there. So
I know. Yeah.
No, it's all good. And so thanks for getting me on.
No worries. Well, so I described you in my Instagram post as Reef Builders new boy, but that's not actually right. You've been around for a little while. But I looked at your Reef Builders page. And it gives you a little description that I'm going to read out for people who might not have known you. And I think you've become a bit more prominent recently because of Reef Therapy and all that. But for those who don't know, I'll read out what this says about you. So Jeremy Gay is an author, editor, lifelong fish keeper with over 20 years in the marine aquatic sector. His experience includes retail, wholesale, publishing, distribution, marketing, manufacturing, and livestock livestock import. He loves the biology of marine ecosystems as well as marine equipment and tech. So you've basically done everything.
I'll tell you what, I was talking to someone the other day. The only job I haven't done in the aquarium industry is public aquarium.
Oh, really?
Okay. That, yeah.
Right. Very good. I mean, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, I spoke to a guy the other day who's just got a job at a public aquarium down in Bristol somewhere, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Is that on the list of things to do? So you can complete
I nearly volunteered. I'm from down south and I moved to the northwest. And at one point, I think when I was at Evolution Aquarium, just after I left, I got in touch with the curator of the Blue Planet Public Aquarium, which is in kind of Chester, and kind of flirted with the idea of doing volunteer work, which I was up for, but it was just a bit too far. And then he moved on, and there was another guy. But one day, I wouldn't mind doing it. I've been behind the scenes a few times. And it's interesting.
Yeah, okay. Very good. And you sort of shot to prominence recently, and people will have seen you on Reef Therapy because you took over after kind of everything went wrong, and after Jake sadly passed away. So how did that come about? Because you were doing kind of a bit of writing for Reef Builders, I think. Tell us a story.
Yeah, I've known Jake Adams for quite a long time. When I was at Practical Fish Keeping years ago, we used to go to this trade show in Germany called Interzoo. It's the biggest pet trade and aquatic show in the world. You should come, by the way, if you haven't been already. It's brilliant. It's an absolute product fest. It's like the size of the NEC or bigger, just full of halls and halls of like aquatic stuff. And I used to bump into Jake there. And then Jake actually wrote for Practical Fish Keeping for a bit as kind of a marine tech guy. So we kind of all grew up in the hobby together. And then he contacted me probably 3 years ago when I started doing a bit of blogging and stuff. And I was whinging about Instagram at the time, believe it or not. And
why were you whinging about Instagram?
I wrote this piece where I said that I'd spent weeks and weeks kind of scrolling through Instagram. And it made me feel rubbish about my own tanks because everyone's tank was beautiful and amazing. And I just kind of came off it thinking, I can't even do this. I can't have the tanks that they've got, the money they've got, And I likened it to the kind of beauty magazines thing of years ago. Like young impressionable girls were told, don't read beauty magazines. They'll only make you feel ugly. And so I wrote this piece about it, and I just said, God, it's making me feel like a rubbish hobbyist. It's making me feel depressed about my own tanks. And he picked up on it, and he said, Jeremy, man, you've got to write for Reef Builders. I was like, yeah, cool. So I was doing lots of different things at the time, so I just started writing a few articles, and I could review products and write news and that sort of thing. And I started off as UK editor, and then he made me European editor, and then at one point I was weekend editor, and various different things just kind of floating around. And little did we know he was kind of planning a family, so he was kind of lining me up to take more and more on, and I couldn't really do it at the time. And then, massive bomb drops in October, and Jake sadly passes away, and I was kind of dropped in at the deep end with his business partner going, I need you to write full time. And I was like, how long for? And he was like, the foreseeable. And I was like, okay, right, I'll have to cancel some jobs then. Just took on from there, but now it's under new ownership, so that's another new chapter. And I'm not actually the newest anymore because now there's a whole load of writers lined up, well-known writers, that I look forward to reading their stuff. So
I've seen. So I can't remember the new owner's name. Is
Raj.
Raj, that's it. And he's
Yeah.
nothing to do with Reef Builders before. He's an outsider, effectively, was he?
Yeah, it's weird. He's well known in the States. He was actually born in the UK, he told me. But he's got a company called My Reef Creations. I didn't know a huge amount about it, but it has been on Reef Builders. Okay. And I think he does lots of things very well, but I think his company does kind of very large commercial protein skimmers and kind of that design and build kind of thing that happens in the States where they do big installs, even in big private homes and that sort of thing. And
oh wow.
So yeah, that's his kind of background.
Gotcha. And there are a few other new contributors. It seems that he's obviously got ideas because there's lots of new people coming in. And the main one that I saw that I noticed was Shane Danger Coleman, who was on the Reef Therapy with you a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he's a legend. Such a nice guy. Really kind of quirky as well, with all his weird tattoos and haircuts and all that sort of thing. But he used to collect corals, and now he works for Sustainable Reefs, I think it's called, in Australia. Yeah. And they are aiming to kind of farm everything, which is really cool. So although they're right next to the Great Barrier Reef, they're like, we've got to start concentrating on aquaculture corals, not mariculture.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and really knowledgeable guy, really nice guy, and I just kind of drained him for information because there's so much that they know that we don't see. This guy's lived on the Great Barrier Reef his whole life.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what happens when the tide goes out? What happens when this happens? Where do these corals live? What lives in shallow water? What lives in dirty water? What lives in deep water? And just kind of like drained all this info out of him. It's fascinating. So, yeah.
That's so interesting. Look, when you speak to someone who sees it in the reefs all the time. I mean, I've been scuba diving once, so I know what a coral looks like under the sun, but that's literally it. But when someone who knows all these things, and one of the things that came out was this something about Aussie gold torches. So there was a while ago, Than from Tidal Gardens made a video talking about gold torches.
Yeah.
And he was told by one of his collectors or importers or whatever that they're collected in estuaries, so they're kind of brackish water, really silty. And Shane Coleman said, no, that's not right. They're from just the Barrier Reef or something.
Exactly. I worked for an importer and a wholesaler a while ago, and gold torches are hot stuff. Obviously, they're one of the hottest corals, either Indonesian or Australian. But lots of people used to lose Aussie gold torches. I don't know what your experiences are with them or Ryan's, but newly imported gold torch from Australia were really, really tricky for lots of different reasons. And then you'd hear these kind of whispers in the trade, oh, they come from estuaries, they're brackish, they do this, they do that. And I remember seeing something that Shane was either growing them or collecting them or culturing them a while back. And I thought, he's got to be the man to ask. And straight away, he said, they come from here, they live in this depth, this kind of turbidity, this. And I was just like, that's fascinating.
For sure. I love that side of things. That was people who scuba dive all the time know that sort of stuff. And I guess if he's out there living on the Barrier Reef, he's gonna see it all day long. But yeah, that was really interesting. I've never bought an Aussie gold torch, but I find torches a little bit fiddly or a little bit sensitive anyway at the best of times. And I've never bought a gold torch because they've got such a bad reputation. And I don't want to spend 400 quid on a coral.
I mean, you've got all the obvious stuff like, brown jelly, but the Aussie gold torches, if you don't frag them right, if you nick the flesh, they get an infection. And it turns out that I think Shane said they live really shallow, sometimes exposed. Can you imagine a gold torch exposed at low tides? It's like, you think you're super delicate. Really interesting was that he said that the torches in the wild in the daytime don't put out tentacles at all. They're closed up. And he said, when I see torch in people's aquariums with tentacles out, I feel that they need more flow. They need way more flow and more light. And I was just like,
so it's almost like they should be treated as a non-photosynthetic coral.
Yeah, it's I look at torch and I look at them and think, you're quite delicate. For years I've said, you don't want too much flow. It's just going to rip the flesh. And Shane was like, no, they're in loads of flow. That's crazy. And don't think it's a bad thing if they close up.
Interesting. Yeah. So and you say you must have. Did you talk to him? Did you know him before you did the Reef Therapy, or was it just
a little bit? Where did I know him from? I think he was involved with Reef Builders Reef Stock show. You know, there's a Reef Stock Australia, and Shane was involved in that, and then Jake flew him over to the one in America. So I kind of knew a bit about him. I think I'd seen some videos, and I just reached out to him, and he's such a nice guy, and he helped me out because Reef Therapy, obviously, after Jake went and Jake and Mark were friends, long-term friends, did it over a beer, very casual, and it was really popular because of that. And then it got kind of handed to me. And first of all, everyone was like, we don't want to touch it. It's sacred ground. It was Jake and Mark's thing. First thing I did is reach out to Mark. Mark was like, I'm really upset. I really don't want to do this. I'm not being funny, but just kind of, I need some time. And I was like, I completely understand. And then just kind of reached out to, I should have reached out to yourself actually, but I was just reaching out to people to just kind of co-present with me and, you know, help me through it. And yeah, so Shane obliged, but it was really, really interesting stuff.
I did see at the start when you first took over, there were a lot of comments saying people didn't know the story that actually Mark had been approached and didn't want to do it. And there was sort of a bit of criticism saying this isn't right, it should be Mark and all these sorts of things. But that's not how it
absolutely. I mean, I think someone even said I want Jake back, and it was like, you know, and I spoke to Mark, and I think I commented on one of them because there was a lot of them saying this isn't the same, it's not right, you know. I said, trust me, guys, the first person I went to is Mark, you know, and it's a business, and people were going, you know, it needed to kind of stop happening when Jake passed away. And it's like, well, what can you do? You know, there's like advertisers and an audience, and I was just kind of like dropped in it, and it felt really awkward for me, you know. So,
but I'm glad it has carried on, and it's totally different, and it was never going to be the same because those two had the rapport and they were mates, and it was like you say, just over a beer. But it's very much good for it, and it's still, I think, has it changed in popularity? From what I can see, it's pretty much the same as before.
Well, it's probably going to change again now that Raj has got the all these kind of all-star writers on. I mean, he's brought Richard Ross on. Richard Ross has got Reef Beast. So I think I'm not sure I'll be doing any more, and that's not a good or a bad thing necessarily, but it may take a very different direction with the guys that are on there now because they do know each other. So you've got like Mike Paletta, you got Sanjay Joshi, you got Richard Ross, you got all the great and the good of the kind of American industry that I grew up reading Paletta's stuff, you know. And because they know each other, it might just flow a bit better. And I think Raj was saying about having more than two people on, which is something I wanted, you know, because apparently the best chats that those guys have are after these Reef shows when they're all at the bar, you know. And I almost wanted that kind of insider kind of, you know, listen to these amazing guys from the industry, just forgetting they're being recorded and just kind of going for it on what they really like and dislike. So that's the way I hope it's going to go anyway.
Interesting. I really like the way Mike Paletta and Sanjay Joshi in particular think. So you'll ask, and I've never met him, but you see him ask a question, and he doesn't just come back with an answer. This is the answer. It's a bit more sort of philosophical and thinks a bit more sensibly, and it makes you step back and think, oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And he's a very interesting bloke.
I mean, both of them are legends, but I still like Mike's. We don't tend to do this anymore, but Mike, with his kind of scientific background, he kind of compares data. And so he's visited all these tanks. And I think one of the questions was, you know, what makes colorful corals? So he contacted kind of 10 or 12 of his long-term friends with amazing tanks full of colorful corals, and then kind of like goes, right, what lighting have you got? And how long is it on for? What do you dose? You know, what skimmer have you got? And just goes back to this very kind of almost citizen science, and then kind of says, well, 8 out of 10 of those tanks used this method, and 2 of them didn't, you know. And it's just kind of, I learned from that, you know.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. We'll carry on with that chat in a sec. A few people have been asking where Ryan is tonight, because I presume I did say right at the start, but not many people watching at the start. So Ryan has had a bit of a disaster. I did see him in the chat earlier, so he might be joining later. But he phoned me about 20 minutes before the stream started to say there was water leaking onto his electric board for his coral farm, and he showed me a shot of it. So there's literally damp on the wall, quite a lot. So I think he's trying to fix that. He did say he was going to come back and join if he can. I'd have other things to do if I was him, but he is lurking in the background. Look at him, creepy that. But okay, so you've got you might be handing over the reins of Reef Therapy.
Yeah, hopefully. I did one recently with David Saxby. That's always a good interview.
I saw,
it was different for me because I turned it into kind of we interview this person as opposed to kind of me and mates kicking back. It's not to say it won't happen, but David's always got loads to say, so it's always entertaining. But I think it's going to take a different direction, probably better kind of production values and stuff as well. So we'll see.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we'll see how that develops. I wanted to get to know you a bit better as well. So actually, first off, you said you're from down south. Where are you from?
So I was born and grew up in Hereford, which is kind of West Midlands. And then when I started working in aquatic shops to kind of progress up the ladder, I moved to a store in Northampton. I lived there for about 8 years. And then I moved to Peterborough, which is where practical fish keeping is. Okay. And then I worked for Evolution Aqua, which is based in Wigan. And that's when I moved north for the first time. And I spent 5 years at Evolution Aqua doing kind of tank design. And it was a koi company. And we kind of brought in kind of marine aquariums. We brought in some brands like Octo, with skimmers, Kessel Lighting and Aquaforest. So I was kind of the person who kind of joined the two up and said, this is a good brand and we should be doing this and doing this. And that was kind of exciting. So I did 5 years there and then kind of went self-employed as a consultant and a writer and a bit of a marketeer. And at the time, everyone was saying, we need social media presence. They probably still are now in all these companies. Suddenly they wake up and go, we need more Facebook coverage. And I was like, I'll do that for you. So a bit of everything. And then obviously that joins up to what we were saying earlier about then Reef Builders came along and went from there.
And that came in. Well, I want to pick you up on something. And Christina agrees with me. Hereford is not down south. Plymouth is down south.
Well, it's really funny. When I went to work in Wigan, they called me a Cockney. And I was like, I'm nowhere near from London. And if you look on a map, if you speak to Northerners, I live in Southport now, which is between Liverpool and Blackpool. If you look on a map and speak to someone in the northwest or the northeast, they'll go, look at a map of the British Isles, and we're actually in the middle. They argue that the north is the Midlands. And you're like, right, okay. But no, she's quite right. Plymouth is proper down south.
When you said I'm from down south, so I'm from Southampton. I'm from down south, and I was thinking, oh, great, you're yeah. And then you say Midlands, and that to me is north. It's funny.
Yeah, that's probably my kind of way that with the Northerners, anywhere south of probably Stoke is south to them.
Stoke's far up north. Yeah, I've got mates. We've got mates from Stoke. That's proper north.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. What was I going to say? Yeah. So, and what's your background in terms of fish keeping then? How did you? When did you start? How did you start? All those sorts of things.
I'm 44 years old, and I reckon I've been keeping fish about 40 years because my parents kept fish. So I was born into a family, and fish keeping was really big in the 80s. I was born late 70s, and in the 80s, everyone had aquariums. My uncles and aunties had aquariums. My nan had an aquarium, and my parents had aquariums. And they had a tropical tank and a cold water tank. And I think I was kind of pushed, left in the buggy kind of in front of these tanks, and it kind of imprinted on me. But my dad was really into fish keeping. And I definitely had my own tanks when I was about 5 years old. And I just kind of got the bug. And through my whole life, I've kept aquariums, and I did various things and worked in various industries. I worked in the wine industry at one point. Okay. So that was kind of weird. And then I went from the wine industry to working in my local fish shop in Hereford. And that quickly escalated. I remember the interview when they said to me, you think you know a lot, but you'll quickly find out you don't. And within 2 weeks, they made me livestock manager. And it was like, oh, really? Okay. So you are quite into fish then. I was like, yeah.
A little bit.
So yeah. And it's just kind of gone from there. But obviously I started off like a lot of people, goldfish, easy tropicals, and then into kind of like cichlids and more advanced stuff, and then marines. I'll probably have my first marine tank in about late 90s.
Okay, as early as that one.
Yeah, and then most of the aquatic shops, I worked in probably 7 or 8 aquatic shops, and most of them had marines. But like I was saying to you previously, I think the marine hobby is on a journey. It's a really exciting journey. The past kind of 10 years or so, and it kind of mirrors the growth of Reef Builders as well. And I've said this about Jake, I remember when I first worked in aquatic shops and people would walk in and say, I want to keep marines. And we'd go, that's not a good idea. it's really difficult. Your tank's too small, I wouldn't bother. And now I help out in my local fish store at the weekend. Complete beginners come in and say, I want to keep marines, and I go, yes, you can do it. I can help you do it. You just need a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of this, and bring your water in. I'll test it. We'll sell you the water, the pre-mixed salt water, and just go for it. And so that's how much the hobby's changed, really.
Well, there's a channel, a freshwater channel called KG Tropicals. You might have heard of it, YouTube channel. And the guys just set up a saltwater tank. It's fish only, but he's just set up a saltwater tank, and it's he was talking about he wants to kind of, because the freshwater and the saltwater side seem to be completely separate. And so I started on freshwater as well for a couple of years, but I just graduated on. And actually, funnily enough, you and I have met. You won't remember this, but there was a freshwater fish show. About 9 or 10 years ago, somewhere in a field.
Not Hailing Island, Festival of Fish Keeping.
Might well have been. And you were there with a stand with PFK.
Yes.
And you were part of the reason that pushed me towards marine, because I talked to you about centerpiece fish in fresh, because I was looking for like a showcase fish that was just spectacular and colorful and all these, and you were saying you want saltwater, mate. Because the things I was describing just don't exist in freshwater. So
I mean, obviously there's beautiful freshwater fish, but
of course,
no, that's interesting. And I love it when people's paths cross, and all these different, we're all connected. It's quite a small world, isn't it, really?
Especially in fish keeping, and especially in saltwater as well. I feel so the freshwater hobby, I think, is relatively big, and lots of people have a tank, even without being enthusiasts or whatever. It's just easy to have a tank. Still challenging, of course, but just you can set one up. Whereas the saltwater hobby is, I feel like it's a fraction of the size. You must have a better idea, having worked in the industry.
Well, it is smaller. There's no doubt. But the guy, it's difficult to describe, really. I think in America, again, I've never been to America, by the way, even though I kind of virtually work there every day. Right. But again, it's kind of its own, even reefing is its own breakaway hobby. It's its own community of people. It's got its own shops, its own shows. And, they're not really interested in other stuff. It's a way of life for some of them, like it was for Jake, eat, sleep, reef, repeat, every single day, and just coral crazy.
Indeed. I said going back to what I said earlier, I wanted to get to know you a bit better. So we'll talk about you've been in the hobby for 1,000 years, since God was a boy, basically. You fresh saltwater since the 90s. So that's under gravel filters, T8 lights, maybe all this. This is long before my time.
I used to go to garden centres, and the first marine tanks I used to see had under gravel filters and 2 for rock and T8 lighting. And power heads blowing bubbles into the tanks, and all the corals were kind of not looking good, and the anemones would always be walking around the tanks because there wasn't enough light, and they were really unhappy. So that was the first. But when I set up, I just used an internal power filter, and I bought a wild caught clownfish and a blue damsel. They were my first 2. And they got white spot within about a week, and there was a heat wave at the time, and the tank was like 30 odd degrees.
Oh, geez.
It didn't last very long, but I kept coming back to it. Every time I failed with marines, I'd kind of go back to trops for a bit, and then I'd learn a bit more and just go at it again. And it's really been an evolution of, I've tried everything, ecosystem method and Berlin method and all these different things, deep sand beds, and eventually after a while, you must get this, you kind of create your own method and just kind of think what works for me. Stability.
Completely. And what works for me is exactly what I was thinking, because it's just, there are so many ways of doing the hobby, and there are some things that are the right way and the wrong way, but not many. And most things you can run a tank with high nutrients or low light, all sorts of different things. There's no right way and wrong way for the most part, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember saying to people when I used to kind of write about these amazing tanks and these reef keepers, that a good reef keeper could probably run one of 10 different methods and still get it right. Do you know what I mean? Because it's about stability of parameters and water changes or not water changes, depending on your kind of methodology. And it's about that, really. Some people are just almost green fingered at growing corals, and they they find it easy, whereas others, you know, when I work in my LFS at the weekend, there are still people when we look at each other and say they really shouldn't be keeping a reef tank. Some people never get it. For some people, it never clicks. But for the probably 10% of us, like yourself, where it does, and then you're off on your own hobby and your own learning experience, and that's great. And then when they come and talk to me, you know, the few that kind of get it and are really into it, that then enriches my experience, you know, when they come back and teach me stuff. So
indeed. Okay. And do you have a tank yourself at the moment?
I do. I've got I call it a shallow lagoon tank. It's a custom built tank. It's only small. It's about 3 feet long by 2 feet wide by about 1 foot high. So it's like a kind of a water box frag style tank.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I've always liked the shallow tanks just because you get that different vista, and I just like to be able to reach into them. And so I set that up in lockdown, and I wasn't working at the time, so it was on a complete budget. And I was literally going into local shops or the wholesalers I worked at and saying, "Can I have that coral there?" And they're saying, "What, that one?" And I'm going, "No, that little nub of like a softie that's under the egg crate. Can I have that?" And they're going, "What, that? Yeah. You can have that." And so I'd come back with all these kind of inch-long little sinularia frags and stuff, and it just kind of went from there, really.
Well, in fact, actually, so I got a couple of questions on Instagram, and that was one of them. So Reef said, "I really want Jeremy to do a YouTube video on his softy dominated tank." So that's what you're talking about, is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's not in this room actually, but yeah, I'd love to. It's thriving, and I've got a soft spot for softies, and I know why it is. It's because, like we said, you know, in the 90s, that's about the only thing that would survive. So it's just kind of imprinted on me again. Soft corals can be lovely. You know, it doesn't have to be about this kind of neon popping psychedelia that we have now. There can still be lovely, lovely soft corals, you know, that in their own right can be, you know, colorful. Or I've got softies through there that are kind of, you know, they're almost as good as an acro. They're like a branching softie with like kind of like feathery bits. And you think, well, that's as good as like a millipora. Do you know what I mean? In terms of shape and looks, but it's so easy. You know,
so in terms of easy, I sometimes I get asked questions about softie only tanks, and the honest answer is I don't really know. I've kept softies, of course, but I've never kept a softie tank. I graduated onto LPS then SPS relatively quickly. So when you say it's easy, is it just kind of you leave it and you don't touch it, or is it sort of regular maintenance and water changes?
If you had to, they're very tolerant of low KH because they don't have the skeleton. Right. So I dose quite high tech. I've got bright light, quite strong flow, and I dose every day. I test my pH, my KH, everything, because it's actually more of a mixed reef now. I've got acros in there and I've got LPS in there, and that's why I do it. But I remember back to probably a year or so into it as a softie tank, I wouldn't test it from 1 week to the next. I wouldn't dose it for KH. The skimmer would stop working. The heater didn't work for about a year, and I didn't even realize it was at 19 degrees Celsius. Didn't even realize.
For a year, did you say?
Yeah, honestly, I moved it into my conservatory, and I suppose on hot days it was hot, and on cold days it was cold because the heater wasn't working. But yeah, that's.
Well, so I rescaped my tank recently. And as part of it, I was pulling out a load of old rocks that had a few zoas on them. Yeah. And I put them into a bucket with a load of salt water in. And I just thought, I'll figure out what to do with them later. I don't really know. And then I came back 3 days later and they were still alive, still absolutely fine in this. And the water was probably 15 degrees, not very warm at all. And there were copepods in there still alive. Absolutely fine.
It's insane. I've seen tank breakdowns as well when, you know, a guy shut his tank down and left it. And there's always about 5 mil of water and a bit of silt in the bottom of the tank, and stuff lives in it for days, if not weeks. And the interesting thing, again, going back to Shane Coleman, was that he shared a picture of the tide out with all these sarcophytons and all these soft corals just baking in the Australian sun. And I asked him about it, and I said, Shane, you know, there's always been this thing about corals, and you shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do that. They're on the beach, high and dry, burning hot, sometimes rained on as well, fresh water, you know, you name it. And they've had this for thousands of years, you know. Every so often there's a super low tide, everything's exposed. And yeah, it's just, I just find it interesting. And corals don't always have to be a challenge. Sometimes I just like to kick back, you know. Hard corals are kind of like my day job. And sometimes I just like to kick back and just go, let's just have a softy tank, you know, no hassle, no worry. And yeah, that's why I do it.
I would never have thought softies get exposed to air. All the time, you always hear about low tide and aquapore and all that sort of stuff and sliming up, but never would have thought that. I would just assume they'd be much deeper. Don't want, you know, not used to having strong light.
Exactly. Every day is a school day. That's what I was saying. You know, you speak to Shane, and I was just like, so what else gets exposed? You know, and he was talking about what was it? It was trachophilia. So, have you got any trackies in your tank?
No.
Okay, so most people kind of struggle a bit with trackies, and we all tend to say this thing about, you know, is my tank too clean? Are they going hungry and that sort of thing? So I asked him about trachophilia, and they live in the kind of dirty zone just off the beach in about a meter depth of water.
Okay,
and it's the parameters are good, but the turbidity is high, and it's full of junk, and it's full of stuff moving around. He says you can't even see your hand in front of your face, and the trackies live there, just the trackies, because it's high in food. Just nuggets like that. It's just really interesting, you know. And then you kind of, and then you speak to a guy in the LFS, and he says, oh, my trackie's not doing very well, I've got a roller filter, I've got this, I've got that, and I'm like,
too much.
There's no food. There's no particulate matter. So yeah.
All right. And are you kind of more of a coral guy or a fish guy, would you say?
I grew up as a fish guy, 100%. I've learned to appreciate corals, and I worked with corals. And again, every day is a school day with corals still. There's still a part of me that bucks the kind of, I don't like all the made up names. I prefer the scientific names. I still like to try and create a natural reef scene as opposed to like a kind of a disco. Do you know what I mean? Even though, you know, I still have all my colors popping with my blue lights, but corals are amazing, you know, really amazing. And every day I find out something new about them. And I'm getting better at it as well.
Yeah. The made up name thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I kind of see both sides with that, because if everybody gave all the scientific names to all the corals, it would probably put a lot of people off. When you look at, because it's a bit tricky sounding. So you need sort of common names, strawberry shortcake, you know, barley green slime, those sorts of things. That's fine, but it gets a bit crazy, doesn't it, sometimes?
And when I worked at the wholesalers, the guys in the fish house started making them up, which I didn't think was helpful. So they'd go, well, no one's ever seen this zoa before, so we'll call it, you know, fairy blah blah blah. And I'd be like, well, one, you're not going to be able to find that on Google to actually look it up, and two, you now know that, I didn't know that, and you know, the guy in the shop doesn't know that, and then the zoa collector doesn't know that, so it all just gets a bit kind of muddied with naming. You know, everyone knows a Jason Fox Raja Rampage, absolutely standard. But when us guys make it up, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that someone on the opposite side of the world isn't making up a different name for the same coral.
That is actually happening. So I bet it's at the other side of the city, let alone the country and the world. But I have a Pikachu aquapora. That whenever I show Americans, if I show Europeans, they're like Pikachu. If I show Americans, they're like, that's not Pikachu, mate. Because they have what they call a Pikachu. It's yellow, but it looks totally, it's a different species. And that's just a small example. But if you've got random people naming it, and the trouble is we don't have like Oata naming corals, for example. But if you've got random people naming them, you're going to end up with different names. And that sort of like with zoas in particular, there are some that really stick and it's really easy. You know, you might have an rastas. Everybody knows what they are. But there are some that will have people will say, no, that's not a rasta. That's there'll be 10 different names for it or whatever. So, and that's when it gets a bit tricky. But
yeah, and I used to work with a zoa guy, and I highly rated him. But sometimes he would confer with other zoa guys, and they couldn't agree, or they didn't know, because you go down to the kind of the lashes, and you know, is it blue with a red lash, or is it red with a blue lash, and what color is the mouth, and all that, and then it just gets mind-boggling.
But the reason, so John Wright asks, as a hobbyist, do we really care about names? I just love watching them. And I get the point there, but names do matter. And so this is one thing that Jake Adams used to talk about quite a lot. And they do matter, because if you call a coral a lobophilia and actually it's an acanthastria, then you'll put two corals next to each other thinking they're the same, and wonder why they're stinging each other. And so there are times when it actually does matter, right?
Yeah, that was really interesting. He was definitely big into that. And yeah, so he was almost starting to set up tanks around, you know, the aggressiveness, or like we just said about trachyphilia, you'd almost have a turbid tank with, you know, LPS in. And when you know the scientific names and you know where they come from, and Shane says, yeah, that comes from a meter depth of cloudy water, you can go, right, this is my turbid tank with my trachys and my catulophilia and that sort of thing. And yeah, so but I think I used to argue about this a lot with scientific names matter with tropical fish, don't they? And, you know, and people used to say, I can't say the scientific names, they're too difficult. And I'd say, but kids know all the scientific names of dinosaurs. You know, every pig can say Tyrannosaurus Rex. People can say boa constrictor. People can say, you know, scientific names do exist. Gardening, you know, chrysanthemum, and, you know, you name it. There are lots and lots of scientific names. They are hard to say, but sometimes you need them to. It's only the scientists making up names, like we are with, you know, if you've got 5 different corals, they'll say that's the one with the spiny ridges, and I'll call that spiny ridgephoria, and that's the one with the, you know, the wide open corallite, and I'll call that, you know, Maximus corallitis, whatever. And it's they're only doing what we do, you know.
But there's a scientific approach to it, because they'll categorize. That's taxonomy, isn't it? So they'll categorize the same genus and species and all these sorts of things, and that's why it does matter. But for the most part, I don't really get too fussed about scientific names. The names do bother me when it's just sort of random names being assigned. But at the same time, that's driven by hobbyists, because what hobbyists will go on a website and look for a coral, and it'll be called pink aquapora. Boring, not interested in that. But if it's called like home wrecker, what's that? It's £1,000, is it?
That's transformed it. I think the Americans kind of must have started it. It's marketing, isn't it? It's getting a coral. And LED lights, you know, as soon as royal blue LEDs came in, reef keeping changed forever. You know, you went from brown corals to crazy neon corals. And when you got something that's crazy neon, you can call it, you know, something. And if it's got a great name and it looks great, it's going to be a popular coral. Simple as that. And I agree with you. It doesn't ultimately matter to the hobbyist. And there's corals that I look at every day that I don't know the trade name. I don't know they're calling it blah, blah, blah. And I don't lose any sleep over it. Whereas with tropical fish, I used to try and know the scientific name of everything.
So you don't really get that with fish. There are some fish, like yellow tang, most people know it's a Zebrasoma flavescens. But if you ask me what, I was going to say purple tang, but I know what that is. They're like a fox face. I could tell you if you reminded me, but there are plenty of fish that that people just don't know. But I think that's kind of, I don't think that really matters so much personally to me. But do you, because you've had that background of it, why is it so important?
So again, have you noticed that every marine fish tends to have like an English name, you know, like a yellow tang, you know, regal tang, whereas quite a few catfish haven't, you know, for example, like Corridorus adolphi or something like that. It's starting to now, but there's been these two kind of parallels. And again, I'm not sure whether it was initial marketing or whether because they were kind of like tourists would see them when they're on holiday or what. But every marine fish, almost every marine fish, has got a kind of a common name that we know and we use, like regal angel, you know, Pygoplytes. And I'll call it a regal angel. I'd never call it by a scientific name. And it's interesting. I don't know why it is.
I think a lot of it is because it's descriptive. So, you know, you might have a Picasso trigger. I don't know what the scientific name for that is, but I'm guessing you'd know a Picasso trigger if you called it a Picasso trigger. Whereas if it's Humalu, whatever, you wouldn't have a clue. So a lot of it is descriptive. And like a rabbit fish, for example, you're like, oh, okay. So it eats
rabbit fish is a weird one though, isn't it? They call it a fox face and it's got a badger face.
It's a bit weird. I don't understand why it's a fox and a rabbit
and a badger. Well, no, it's not.
It should be a badger. We'll recall it. We'll reclaim it. It's now a badger fish.
Well, it's right. That's a good point. I was talking to TMC the other week, and this ties the whole thing in. One of the last conversations I had with Jake Adams was about the names of marine fish, and he noticed that we call fish different names in the UK to the US. So over there, they call it a 6-line wrasse, but we call it a pajama wrasse. Over there, they call it a chalk bass, and we call it a Caribbean blue bass. And he said, "What are you Brits doing? He said to me, just because you had the British Empire, you think you can just make up names for things? You can just make up English names for fish? What's going on?" And I spoke to Brian Schaff at TMC, the CEO there, and he said that's probably due to a guy called Derek, who's the fish guy, who's been at TMC since year 1, 40 years ago. He said they sat there making up common English names for scientific names of marine fish that were just on lists. So you can trace
that's
that.
Where pajama comes. Yeah. This must be a generation thing, or there must be a certain year when this changed, because I know a 6-line wrasse is a 6-line, and a chalk bass is a chalk bass. So it's come over here now. But if you've been in the hobby for a bit longer, that's where the older names come from and they stick around.
Yeah, and we're influenced, but because of the internet, we're international now, aren't we? We're all completely international, whether we like it or not. So we're heavily influenced by the Americans as well. So,
all right. And what about kind of equipment? You said, I think you've been described as a tech junkie. Are you into that sort of thing?
I love equipment.
Okay.
I could watch a protein skimmer all day long. I don't even need fish or corals. I'll just watch a protein skimmer running. I'm obsessed with lighting, or at least I used to be. Wave makers, they're just toys, whether or not it's because I was a kid literally playing with them. For me, like marine equipment, it's so much fun, and that's where kind of freshwater kind of leaves, because you get up to kind of external canister filters, LED lighting, CO2 systems, you're done. But marines, oh my word, every day there's something new, new gadgets, and it's great. Are you into equipment?
Yeah, so and Ryan is vomiting about it. Ryan's not interested in equipment. I love equipment. I'm a total gear junkie. And I like all that side of things. But yeah, so I'm very much the same. But is there kind of is there one piece of equipment that you think that has sort of changed the game over the last 10 years or so? Because you've seen the hobby from a while ago.
I think there's multiple pieces of equipment. Basically, we learned more about flow, and we went from power heads to propeller pumps. That was a big deal. There's been several quantum leaps. LED lighting, that didn't necessarily change things, because early LEDs weren't very good, and you could grow corals, and you can now with T5. And before T5, you could grow corals with metal halide. So that wasn't such a kind of quantum leap, even though we all now use LED. That's been a huge change.
Well, with LEDs, I think like the selling point when they first came in was that they were lower consumption, so there'll be less electricity and all these sorts of things. But actually, so above my tank, I've got 600, God knows how many watts of electric, a lot more than I would have if it was halides even.
Exactly. So this is an interesting thing. So I remember, again, kind of 10 years ago, you're quite right. They were sold on energy saving, low heat, low power consumption, and exactly the same as you. I looked at my tank about a year ago, and I had, say, 400 watts, and I was like, but that's the same as an 8 times T5 unit, or a twin 150 metal halide plus 2 T8 tubes. That side hasn't actually changed, but the controllability, the apps, they do run cooler than halides, a lot cooler. But you're quite right. The wattage is actually quite similar. And I found that if your lights aren't producing heat, your heater just kicks in more anyway. So it's all relative. I used to have metal halides that were super hot, and they were actually heating part of my tank too much in the summer. But when you just run cool running LEDs, your heater's on more. So you're actually running the same watts.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to try halides. I've never done so, partly because of the electricity, but mainly because of the heat. And like last year in the UK, it was 40 degrees C, which was ridiculous. Yeah. And so you've obviously run tanks with halides before.
Yeah. I used to work with them and sell them and review them and run them. I think people look at them with rose tinted glasses. I think a lot of people forget they were incredibly hot, quite a piercing light as well. And back then, they made everything look brown.
That's the only thing I don't like about them, is the yellow kind of look they give the tank. And a lot of people do like that. Yeah. And I like my tanks on the whiter side of blue. I don't want it to be blue all day long.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be yellow. I went to, actually, you went there a couple of weeks ago, Signature Frags in Derbyshire.
Great shop.
I went, yeah, really good shop. I've not been ever. I've been meaning to go for a long time. I was really impressed. Very good. My wallet came away a lot lighter than it was when I went in though. But he runs. He said it was the Radions, and it was, what was it called? AB Plus spectrum.
Yeah. On G5 Blues, I think.
That's it, yeah. And but it was I asked him what I commented, because it looks quite a yellow light.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it was AB Plus. I thought it was even yellower than that. But he was quite keen on that being, so obviously blues in the evening and blues for the fancy show. But that's what grows corals. And his theory was, well, look, Ecotech are the biggest company that sell the most lights. They put the most into research. So I'm not going to play around with their spectrum. I'm just going to set it to that. And it was just interesting. And that does more closely match the old kind of spectrum of halides, I guess.
Yeah, and AB Plus was made to match a T5 lamp, an ATI T5 lamp that BRS always used to talk about. Is it the Aqua Blue Plus or one of them?
ATI Blue Plus, yeah.
Yeah, and they would always say that's the perfect spectrum. And if you look at kind of AB Plus, it's a kind of an LED equivalent of the ATI Blue Plus lamp. So yeah, they all kind of follow that, really.
Right. Okay. I do like a bit of Blue Plus, but I've had T5s over most, if not all, of my tanks at one point, but I've got a bit bored of them. I just don't like particularly with the Blue Plus bulb. It's a real Windexy, funny look, and it's just flat. There's no shimmer. I can't.
No shimmer, and they make brown things look more brown as well, I find.
But they do grow corals well still. Still very, very good.
I actually switched to back to T5 probably 18 months ago, and I ran them for about 2 months just for fun. And the corals were literally like, the spread and the evenness. They were just basking in it, but the pop wasn't there, or the shimmer. So.
No, that's it. What lights do you run on your tank?
I've got 2 Ecotech Radian G6 Pro, but again, they're on AB Plus.
Okay.
So and they just, very widespread. They just run and run. But before that, I had success with 2 AI primes. That was good. The only reason I moved from the primes is because I've got such soft coral growth. They just kind of shade each other out. And, because the tank footprint is wide, it's 3 by 2 feet. And I just had 2 primes. The stuff at the front would be shaded by the stuff that was nearer the lamp, if you know what I mean.
And is this still all the softies you're talking about?
Yeah, sorry. I've got mainly softies, but there's LPS in there. I've got some Bauer Bank eyes. I've got a Catulophilia, various Coralastria, stuff like that. And then I've just got some easy SPS. I've got some Montipora Capricornis plates, some Stylophora, purple Stylo. What else have I got? Seriatopora, dead easy stuff. And then I've got a few acro frags, because every so often I just want to punish myself and just kind of beat myself back down when I'm convinced how easy all corals are. And then I'll put like a tenuous frag in, and it'll just punish me within like a week or two and just strip. Yeah. And then I'm like,
pain in the arse. So my tank is mostly Aquapora, mostly SPS, but tenuous. I have one tenuous that's grown really well. Most of them take a long time. I've got one that I've had for about 2 years.
Yeah.
If it has grown, I can't see it.
Absolutely.
If I look back at photos, it might have grown 20%, but it's still that big. Literally 2 years.
Yeah, and that happens to everyone. And in the Northwest, I'm lucky to have met some really top coral growers. And every so often they'll walk in looking like something terrible's happened. I'll say, "What's happened?" And they'll go, "They've all stripped. All the tenuous stripped." After 2-3 years, and these guys are experts. And what's funny is that tenuous and millies are the 2 most popular acros, the biggest selling acros. We all walk into a shop going, "Oh, is that a Walt Disney? Is that a home wrecker? Is that this? Is that that?" They're really, really tricky, And I'm lucky to speak to Vincent Chalice over in Indonesia, the godfather of coral growing, and he said the other day that they all strip. And he sold tens of thousands of them.
Okay.
So very sensitive.
Right. There were a couple of things we messaged before on Facebook. and there are a list of topics that that you said you wanted to talk about, or that we could talk about.
Yeah,
and one of them that jumped out for me was Chinese manufacturing.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating. So when I've worked in various jobs, a lot of roads literally lead to China in terms of where our products come from. So even products that are made in the UK, like in every industry, like a car, very often the components still come from China, or some of the components. And I've watched this kind of growth in Chinese products from, say, the 90s, when the first kind of pond pumps were made in China and pond and water gardening was big, to them becoming expert at aquarium manufacturing and wave pumps and LED lights. And so we, when you go to Interzoo in Germany, big trade show, they have like a Chinese hall effectively. And that hall is where, so you'll get like German manufacturers, you'll get British manufacturers, and you'll get wholesalers and distributors. And we'd all end up in this kind of China hall, and you'd all kind of stand there thinking, I really like that wave pump, you know, and you'd go up and talk to them, and there would be your rival from company X, a well-known company, plus another well-known company, and we're all kind of fighting for, like, I want that pump. And you end up going to China and visiting them, and it's fascinating because, first of all, there's the culture shock of how busy it is. So a lot of products are made in a province called Guangdong, and within there's a place called Guangzhou, and within there's a place called Foshan, and Guangzhou's got like 14 million people in it, and it's massive. And the first time we went to look for LED lights, we got a kind of a guide who owned an LED factory, and he took us to one district in China, and there were 2,000 LED lighting factories in one district.
Right. Wow. This is just that, making LEDs for all applications, I think.
All applications, everything from toys to car headlamps to aquarium, you know, and aquariums.
But it's funny because so a lot of stuff is made in China, or some parts of it. You mentioned parts, but it seems that the companies that come out of China don't tend to do very well. There's Jebao or Jekod, whatever they're called this week. Are possibly the exception. But apart from that, there was a company recently, I forget what they were called. They were quite big in the freshwater world, and they made lights. And they made a light for marine tanks that looked. It was basically a rip-off of a radium. And I can't remember what they were called now. But they don't tend. But I've not seen any. That was about a year ago. I've not seen anything since. And it tends to be the established brands, like German brands and American brands. You don't see many Chinese brands coming through. So maybe it's just their forte is the components rather than the whole product.
But they also, many well-known lighting brands, even popular ones that may be on some of our aquariums, not Radians, but are made in China. And so they do what they call OEM manufacturing. So other equipment manufacturing. So you would rock up at a leading pump factory or light factory, and a lot of people do this. They'll go, this is a Radian, it's really popular, it's got 9 channels and it looks like this, and it's got this and it's got that, and some people actually hand it to them and say, make me a version of that. So that happens a lot. And then sometimes you'll turn up at a Chinese trade fair, and they will have hundreds of different lights all on offer, and you'll see one and you'll go, that would make a great aquarium light, and you'll tweak it. And so you'll give it to them and say, look, it's got to have CE approval, it's got to have an app, it's got to have separate channels, it's got to have UV, it's got to have this. And so that's how it works.
I think that's what TMC do, because they brought out a range of pumps recently. I have one on that tank behind me, Reef Pump Compact or something.
That's it. I've got one.
I forget the name of the company, but I think what they do is they approach a company over there, and then they say, look, all these things that you've just mentioned, it needs to have an app CE approval, all these sorts of things, and they tweak it. And that's how it works. So.
And it's how it works for loads of people, and it's not always a bad thing. We all think it's terrible, but it helps to keep the cost of these things down, because when you work in product development, if you wanted to make a brand new pump from the ground up, it would take years and it would be really expensive, and you would then have to build the costs of that development into your eventual product. And so a quicker way to do it is to go to a huge pump manufacturer who already has various different kind of prototypes, and they call them molds and tools. And so, you know, they will have a tool for a 1,000-litre-an-hour pump. You know, so that's half the battle done because they've invested in it, and they'll have an impeller for it, and they'll have the windings for it, and they'll have the cable and the plug. And then you can go, but I want a different outlet nozzle. You know, I want this, or I want 10 different incremental power, you know, levels on it, and you just kind of tweak it that way. Whereas others just do their own thing. I believe Ecotech entirely manufactures in the US, I believe.
I prefer the idea of stuff manufactured either in Europe, the US, wherever, and particularly so Jecod. I rate Jecod pumps. I've got probably half a dozen on my various tanks.
Yeah,
I do like them.
Yeah,
but
I've been to that factory. It's crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's one of the big ones. And so if you set up an aquatic company tomorrow and someone said, Alex, I need a wave pump and a return pump, you just get on a plane and go to Jecod because they're the biggest, and you turn up and they say, yeah, what do you want? We got 100 different pumps. What would you like? You know, and that would be the quickest way of you doing it.
But I think the quickest route is sometimes taken. So with Jecod, I'm sure they have CE approval stamps on them.
Yeah.
But they're the only pumps that if I unplug the power supply from the control box, I get sparks. If I do that on my MP40s, I don't get that.
Yeah.
And there's just little things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not enough to put me off buying it. I might change my mind if my house burns down. But there's just, but it gives me comfort buying American and European products.
Generally. Yeah, and similarly, like before the Americans were big, because I've said it recently that I think the Americans lead the world now in aquarium LED lights. I think you've got Ecotech, you got AI, you got Kessel. You know, they lead. Whereas it used to be the Germans. So in T5s and in metal halides, it was Giesmann. You know, various other companies over there, and now it's kind of shifted. And it's.
Yeah, and because Kessel make their own LEDs, don't they? Their own in-house LEDs. There's this massive. I only know this through BRS, but this Dicon Optics is the parent company. This enormous LED company.
Go
on. The one thing. So over in the UK, so I'm a bit of a Kessel fanboy, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the one thing that bothers me about them is the price.
Yeah.
Because in the UK, in the States, they're roughly the same price as a Radion. And I've never understood why they're so expensive in the UK.
Yeah, because so I used to sell Kessel and I used to be the brand manager for them at Evolution Aqua. Evolution Aqua are the distributor. I love them too. And there's a lot more to the spectrum that people give them credit for. So you know how in recent years everyone's moved into the violet and the ultraviolet? Kessel always had that, you know, and they are experts. They've built lights for NASA and loads of different people, you know, proper science. And like you say, they're one of the few that make their own chips. The difference is Kessel is based in America, and you could be a retail shop and you could buy them from Kessel. And in the UK, Kessel isn't based here. So then you have to buy them from someone like EA who distributes them and buys them in and flies them in and warehouses them and does the marketing and the sales and all that sort of thing. So there are more people involved. And also there's the exchange rate and the freight. So that's what makes it different. But yeah, I wish Kessels were cheaper as well.
But that applies to everything. So you've got to fly Radions over here. You've got to apply the tax and that sort of. I've never quite understood. But I'm not saying it's necessarily the worst thing in the world. And you're talking about spectrum, and so BRS have done a lot of stuff about spectrum lately. And Kessel always come out as they're a bit of a sleeper, and I feel like they're not very popular over here. But in the States, they're a lot more popular. I don't really understand why they're not more popular over here. Maybe it's the price.
I'd say it's the price and the warranty. It's a 2-year warranty in the US and a 1-year warranty in the UK, and that's not the distributor's fault, by the way, either. Because when I worked for the distributor, we wanted the 2-year warranty. Also, Kessel don't want you to service them, whereas if you have an AI light and it goes wrong, AI D&D, the distributor in the UK, will service them.
Right. Okay.
So some people get bit. You know, some people pay slightly more for a Kessel and only get the 1-year warranty, and then they can't service it and they can't repair it, and they tend not to go back.
But they're brilliant lights. No, they're wicked. I love them. You just can't beat the shimmer. But yeah, okay, all right. So that's Chinese manufacturers done off. The other thing, so then this was more back into the getting to know me category, was my influences. So your influences. Tell us about what's influenced you.
Who influenced me?
Yeah.
Well, like we said, Mike Paletta. I've got Mike Paletta's book behind me on my bookshelf, signed.
Okay, yeah.
People like Sanjay Joshi is the god of lighting. David Saxby, I've known him for 20 years, and his tank's always inspiring and inspirational. And anyone could influence me. A guy could walk into my LFS and we'll get talking about pH, and then he'll just go off on about pH, and I think, this is great. Let's talk about pH all day, and that influences me. Who else? I don't know. They're mostly American guys, and most of them are the ones that are lined up to go on Reef Builders. So yeah, okay. Jake Adams, obviously legend. Absolute legend. Who else? Tony Vargas, people like that.
Yeah. He's the photographer guy, right?
That's Michael Vargas.
Michael Vargas.
Yeah, Tony. He's from that kind of old school again. They're all kind of cutting edge in the kind of early noughties and late 90s. They all started being able to grow like aquapora and stuff like that years ahead of everyone else with calcium reactors and metal halides. So they, that's why Mike Paletta, bless him, kind of looks at us all now, just going, we were doing this ages ago. Don't think you're the new guys, because we were the new guys 30 years ago.
Well, that was it. And so people have worked out how to keep aquapora 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and there's a channel called, I don't know how into YouTube you are, probably not quite as obsessed as me, but do you know Coral Euphoria?
Possibly.
Guy called Abe Tirona. He's mainly does videos on aquapora. He also has a shop in the States called Coral Euphoria, so he sells his acros.
Yes, I've watched his videos. Yes, I do know who you mean.
He's just so good. I think he's the best YouTuber in the hobby for me. And
I find his voice incredibly soothing as well. And when,
right?
And when he talks about acros, and he does it as a kind of a voiceover, people always ask me how I should grow acros, and this is what I do. And I just find it really relaxing just to listen to.
And so that's the thing. He's been doing this for quite a while, and he always says, you do the things people have been doing for 20 years.
Yeah.
You don't piss around with all these newfangled ideas and trying to be bleeding edge technology, all these sorts of things. There are things that will help you, of course.
Yeah.
But the principles are the same and haven't changed. I love that.
Yeah. And that's what Jake Adams did. Jake Adams, Kaltwasser reactors, calcium reactors. Okay, he was massive into LED, but he called it the reef keeping fundamentals. And I haven't used a Kaltwasser reactor since the year 2000. I don't think I've used a calcium reactor in 20 years, and yet he had way better coral growth than me. And you're kind of thinking, they are right, like you say. Don't revisit it. And
but with that being said, one of the things you mentioned a minute ago was pH, and that seems to be that's a lot more light has been shed on pH recently. So have you got kind of experiences and opinions on pH?
Yeah, I'm using a brand of pH enhancing 2-part at the moment.
Reef Elements.
Yeah, it's changed things in my tank, even with the softies, but particularly with the SPS. So I've had 2 different pH meters, and I mean, I could probably show you now, but my pH, I get highs of about 8.6 and lows of about 8.3. When I first put a pH meter on, and when it was just softies, I was getting lows of 7.8. Softies don't mind, but that's no good for hard corals. And that really made me sit up and start to explore pH. And now,
so when you said you've noticed a difference, what difference have you noticed?
Growth. The growth in like a Stylophora or a Seriatopora or a Montipora or an Acropora, they get extra growth tips on them. They actually branch within a week of being in a higher pH. So your Seriatopora bird's nest is kind of doing its own thing. The purple stylo is doing its own thing. You've got like that many. And then within a week, it will side branch off there and there and there and there. And you've just got white tips that you never had before. And the Monty, the white growth ring on the Monty is just going berserk. And the acros suddenly were 1 inch long, and now they're 2 inches long. It's recordable, I believe. Anyway.
Interesting. Okay. And so do you like 8.3 to 8.6? No, I've never been able to get an answer of what high pH is too high, 8.6 is the kind of point when I'm thinking, I'd rather it not be much higher. Does it bother you? It seems okay, I guess.
Yeah, I remember I watched Chris Meckley and the guys in America. So they use the kalkwasser slurry, which is like a kind of a concentrated form, and they're all into that. So they do a different method to me. And I've seen loads of kind of podcasts and things when they've said you go over 8.5, you're into like, otherworldly kind of, don't go. It's like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters. It's like, don't go there. Don't go above 8.5. Yeah. It's catastrophic. And I've gone to 8.6 and it's been fine. But there is one thing from my freshwater days: the higher the pH, the more toxic ammonia becomes. And an 8.6 pH, if I did have ammonia, not that I do, that would probably be pretty lethal, I would guess.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm definitely enjoying high pH.
Do you dose? Is it just Reef's Elements that you dose?
Yeah, along with a mix of kind of aminos and that sort of thing. But the other thing about pH is people talk about farming corals in the UK, and a lot of the time I talk them out of it. And when you look at the examples in the States, they all use kalkwasser, and they use it because it's a cheap way of getting a high pH. And if there's one thing that high pH gives you, it's growth. And you need growth for fast turnaround of corals to make money when you farm. So that's where I think the UK has always been a bit slow in that. We've got a pH of 8.1 and we're going to set up a coral farm. Those guys are rocking 8.4 all day long, blasting them, and they will turn around corals twice as quickly as we could.
So I'm a big fan of kalkwasser. I've been using it for about a year on my tank. I only discovered it relatively recently, but it's just fantastic. It gets dirt cheap. It boosts your pH up, your growth. So when I started dosing it, I'm also dosing 2-part.
Yeah.
And I started dosing it and I thought, well, I'm dosing 3.5 liters of kalkwasser a day.
Yeah.
Quite a lot. I figured my 2-part dosing is going to drop quite a lot. But it actually more than doubled because my corals were growing so quickly.
Yeah.
And so that's doubled, and despite the fact that I'm putting in alkalinity with the kalkwasser as well.
Yeah, kalkwasser again, it's like a multi-generational thing. You're using it. Jake Adams used it and swore by it and had amazing results. And he learned it off Julian Sprung, who was using it 40 years ago. And it exactly goes back to what you just said about that, like Abe says, don't write off the early successes. They were doing it then. Kalkwasser is not broken. If anything, we've fine-tuned it and enhanced it. It's brilliant. And again, the farms use it because it's so cheap. It's the cheapest way of buffering. And that's why they use it.
Indeed. And it's just the only thing that bothers me about kalkwasser is the space you need.
Yeah.
So I had, until recently, I've got a 400-litre tank and I had a 100-litre container. It was bloody massive. Yeah. And I finally saved up a few quid to buy a kalk stirrer.
Yeah. So
I've saved that space. But it was enormous. And it was in my utility room, in the room behind the tank. But still, it was just too big.
Yeah. Likewise, I know a few guys who I think they've just bought at least a 100-litre container. They have to keep it in their garage and all that sort of thing. But it is what it is. Again, it's just one of those small, simple things that makes hard coral growing a lot easier. I think. And
I think everybody should be using it.
So, did you say you use a kalkwasser stirrer?
Yes.
Don't you think we need more choice in kalkwasser stirrers in the UK?
100%.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And yet these things are available in China. And I've sat with a few British companies going, you really just want to go to China and buy that cheap kalkwasser stirrer because your choice is like Deltec at 510 quid or whatever it is, and then nothing, and people have to DIY it.
There are a couple. There's the Deltec, which I bought. That's 430 quid for the smallest one. And then there was a Reef Octopus one, but I couldn't find it over in the UK.
It's not in the UK. Yeah.
No, there you go. And there was another one by, I can't remember the name of the company, but it looked a bit. It was cheaper, but it looked a bit cheap, and it just looked a bit rubbish. But I guess because kalkwasser it's still not really that popular. It might be more popular than it was a couple of years ago, but it's still not really that popular. And you're not hooking the new people with kalk because it's not sexy, is it? So I would guess the market's still relatively small. And even the Deltec kalkwasser stirrer at 400 odd quid is expensive. and I feel like it's more expensive than it should be. But I also wonder if making a good one is going to be that much cheaper, or if that's just what it costs.
Yeah, you need it to be reliable, don't you? You don't want it to leak, and you want that thing to stir forever, you know. So I suppose it's like they say, buy cheap, buy twice. You'll never really know, but I don't know. The choice is just, I think, again, we're influenced because we're used to be Europeans, where we were influenced by, you know, 2 head, 3 head doses and 3-part, you know, the classic kind of Hans Werner balling method, you know, and variants of that. Whereas in the States, they were still kind of like calcium reactor, Kaltwasser stirrer, where we were going like, we just want to dose it from a bottle. But yeah, I'd just like to see more choice. And I've sat with a few companies and said, oh, you're missing a trick. I think they'd sell a few hundred or a few thousand a year.
The thought has crossed my mind to make a device and a Reef Dork Kaltwasser stirrer, because it's the sort of thing that I could get behind very easily. But it's just, I've got a full-time job. This is a small part. And I'm sniggering because the people are commenting in the comment section, and I don't know what they're saying. Alex, look behind you is one of them. And I don't know, there's something going on, but I missed it. But anyway, we have the second half of the Prestige Reef Dork show has come in.
So, all right. You okay?
What time do you call this?
Well, you know, it took me all this time to escape from your basement, because obviously after I won last time, you know, with my little trophy, after I won last time, you didn't want me back, did you? So I've been watching you interview Jeremy as a new host, and I thought, you know, this is outrageous. So I thought, come, you know, break up the party.
Getting jealous. So Jeremy, for the last couple of weeks, we've been doing competitions where we get the viewing public to vote on who's got the best tasting in corals, fish, inverts, all these sorts of things.
Sure.
And I've printed trophies, and Ryan's smug because he won last week.
It was a landslide.
Wow. What was it over?
Last week's was inverts, wasn't it? And the week before that, I think, was coral. And then I was robbed with regards to fish as well. So
yeah, I can cheat because it's my channel. So
that's true. That's true. But genuinely, this has been the most interesting live stream that I've seen in ages.
Oh, cheers, right?
Because you're not on it, and we've got someone better.
No,
that's basically true. Yes.
No.
But I don't know how long I'll be here for. You obviously know this, but everyone else doesn't. I have COVID at the moment, so I might go into a coughing fit, and if I do, I'll leave. So I just thought I'd join you for temporarily.
Fair enough. Well, good to have you here.
I did have something to say, actually, because I was like shouting at the screen when you were saying this about naming corals.
Yeah. Okay.
Look, you'll laugh now, but it is useful when you're selling them, because if someone calls me up and says, "Have you got this green one with a yellow center and red lashes?" It's much harder than if someone says, "Have you got a name of it?" If you see what I mean. So
playing devil's advocate with that, if I phoned up and said, "Oh yeah, I'm looking for a green coral Australia," wouldn't you just be like, "Yep, got it"? No problem.
No, I wouldn't. It depends what it is. There's some corals where they've all different like colorations for like the Gonioporus, but they're quite similar. So you might have pink with gold tips, or pink with green tips, or pink with, and it helps when it helps from that perspective.
And that's, so we talked about fish earlier, and that's like when a fish name is descriptive. I think that's true of corals as well. So like sometimes you get like an Iron Man, Gonny mushroom, whatever. And if it's and you know it's
red
going to be
gold,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's when I agree. That is when it's useful. But I did see you went through a spell. I don't know if you still do this, Ryan, but you started putting corals as PR Montipora.
Oh, I did that at the very beginning. That lasted about a week.
Okay.
So no,
it does happen, and there's always arguments about the kind of provenance. And I think like when you went to Signature believes that he can name them after so many generations of frags. Do you know what I mean? And then he'll say, "This is, you know, I grew it, I named it, I colored it, and now it's, you know, Gen 3, so I get to call it this." And I'm like, that's fine, you know.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So Ryan, you've been watching for a while. Have you got any questions on what you've seen so far? Any questions?
I've been busy. I sent you pictures of what I showed you earlier because people were asking for proof of while I'm not here, and I think I've solved it. Well, I haven't solved it, but because it's still leaking. But some things are more important. You know, I've got to be here.
Indeed, yeah, a bit of a disaster. So, all right. So there are a couple other things. One of the other things you had on your list of things to talk about, Jeremy, was the American reefing scene. Now, I know nothing about the American, well, or not nothing, but I have no first-hand experience. You and Ryan probably have a lot more than me.
Yeah, I think Ryan's been over there a load of times. I've never even been over there. As I say, I virtually work in America Monday to Friday for Reef Builders. But I've learned a lot about, I think I've learned a lot about the scene. Like I said, that it's just its own entity over there. Whereas we're starting to do that. We're breaking away, but we still classify it as aquatics, you know, indoor aquariums, whatever. And our shops are still mainly mixed. We're getting more and more marine only shops now, but over there, it's just a way of life for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, growing frags, swapping frags, especially these legacy frags. We don't tend to do this, you know, the frags that they'll go, I had this 20 years ago and he got it off Steve Tyree and Steve Tyree got it off Julian Sprung and Julian got it off Mike Paletta. I don't think we do that, you know. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, I tell people that I've got Reef Dork zoas. So
do you really?
Yeah, I actually do. If people come to the farm and they want scrambled egg zoas, I tell them they came from you. So if they're shit,
why don't I get a commission? That's my intellectual property in that case. You're infringing on my copyright.
No, people, if they've got 2 YouTubers attached to them, people want them.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I'm saying.
Fair enough, actually. Yeah, it is provenance. Yeah.
I think people like a lot of the corals that I sell are basically exactly the same as the corals everyone else has, because at some point in time I got them from everyone else, if you see what I mean. So I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I've still got my second coral. It might be my first, which is a frog spawn, which grew to like this big, and then I fragged, and I've now got one piece of it. But people buy from me because they trust me. If same as signature frags, they trust that the corals are being kept in an appropriate condition and hopefully pest free and things like that. So there is some, I'm not sure where I was going with this. There is some like reason why people want to buy from legacy people, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you've held on to those corals that long, because every so often I'll shut a tank down. Like say if I move house, and I'll get rid of everything, and then I'll start from scratch, because you don't want pests, do you? So you go, right, I'm going to have new rock, new tank, new sand, new everything. And I've never, even though some of my corals were nice from 15 years ago, I don't have any of them. My oldest coral now is like 3 years. It was like a cat frag.
I've still got a fish, which I've had for 15 years.
Yeah. You're definitely more of a kind of a nurturer, more attached to them, I think. Which is
I do get attached.
Yeah.
There's been a very important question in the chat. Jeremy, I'm going to ask you first. And it is, who would win in a fight between 3 of you?
Definitely Jeremy.
What kind of fight? What kind of fight?
No rules. Do whatever you want.
All right. Okay. Can I put a twist on it?
Go on.
Because I used to ask people this when I was bored in aquatic shops. If we had to have a fight, what piece of aquatic equipment would you arm yourself with? So we can have one piece of equipment each to absolutely muller each other. What are you going to go for?
I feel like
I'm terrible with equipment, so I can't even think of anything. But
I feel like Nios skimmers are really solid. I'm
going for an MP40. You know, the
short
magnet.
range, the dry
magnet. Just
yeah. Well, it was so long ago when I asked it. I think I thought light tube at the time. I just thought I'd just kind of smash it into someone. It would just like explode and spike people. But yeah.
Apparently, I'm far more violent than you then.
Exactly. Really strong magnets as well. You know, when you get your fingers caught in strong magnets, and or what about kalkwasser and throw the kalkwasser?
Oh yes, blow it in Ryan's eyes, blind him. Yeah.
What in Ryan's eyes?
And there's a weird request that comes up quite often, I'm afraid, on this live stream. James wants to see your biceps, Jeremy.
I haven't got any. I've just got saggy. That's it. That's all I got. I'm a writer. I can lift a mouse, and that's about it.
Okay, Ryan, do you have biceps that you want to show people?
No one knows. The only person who's ever shown them on this street meet is you. So
and Mindy.
Oh yeah, actually that's true. Mindy did see him as well. I can't believe you've never been to America, Jeremy.
Right. I don't want to talk too much about it, but I'm meant to be at Reef Stock right now. Reef Stock is happening
really?
today. And Jake invited me over before he died to see the studio, which is still running, and to go to Reef Stock. And because there's been loads going on, I'm not there. But yeah, I should literally be there today.
So you've never been tempted to go to Macna or anything like that? I know you go to Interzoo. I've been to Interzoo myself.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm massively tempted. And now I'm more involved in the American scene. I just want to... Macna's just... it's not happening this year. I don't know if you saw the news on that.
Yeah, I saw it cancelled, wasn't it?
Yeah, but Macna's the classic famous one. Reeferpalooza, a lot of people talk about.
Do you know why it's been cancelled?
Not really. It's organised by Masna. I don't know enough of the kind of ins and outs of it, but something's happened. Some of the comments said that because it's run by a club, certain people weren't coming forward to fulfil the roles to make the show happen. I think. Yeah. I don't know.
Because do you think that the shows are getting smaller than they used to be?
Possibly. Yeah,
because that's something that I noticed. It might have the reason I may have noticed it. I went to Macna in Vegas first, which was like everyone from everywhere went to Vegas because of the location.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. And I've never been to another show which was quite like that one. The next one was in Florida, and there was a hurricane. That was Reeferpalooza. So, and then everyone, there was one day, and then it was meant to be a 2-day show, and then everyone left on the first day. Even the people that were there, with stands, left.
Yeah.
So I left, and I went back to Vegas. But I've wondered if the hobby's actually getting smaller, or people are just less interested at getting together. And I was interested in what you thought.
Yeah, I don't know if COVID had an effect on that. We all got a bit lazy. I mean, I work from home now. I can't imagine, I used to drive everywhere and get up at 9 a.m. and, do all that. And now you're just like, but I can run a whole business on a phone. I can just give me a laptop and an internet connection. It doesn't matter where. I don't need to drive to an office. And I think with shows as well, because you can live stream it.
Yeah.
People are like, I'll just sit at home. I don't need to get on a flight to cross America, east to west to go to a show. Maybe, I don't know.
I found that they were very different to when I went to Interzoo. So I went to Interzoo with Red Sea as part of like their advertising campaign at the time. They bring out new skimmers and everything. And but that's all manufacturers, isn't it? They're not hobbyists, and they're all there for business. And everyone, it's like most people are in suits, and I'm walking around in my shorts and flip flops. So no, it was great because no one approached me. They're trying to draw you in, aren't they, to talk to you? Well, that's actually where I met Jake Adams for the first time.
I bet he wasn't wearing a suit.
No, he wasn't wearing a suit. No, no.
Shorts and t-shirt always, and sandals, baseball cap.
You can tell a YouTuber, can't you? Because they're at the shows in flip flops. Yeah. But when I went to Reeferpalooza and Macna, there's a very different vibe. It's because like everyone's in it together. If you see what I mean, and you have all these different people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Like, and they all have all different backgrounds, and everything, but they have this one thing in common.
Yeah.
And so everyone gets on with each other.
Yeah. Most
of the time.
Yeah. I definitely agree, and I think I've said it before. That's what's wrong with the British shows, in that it's so political. And I'm talking broadly about everything from koi shows to tropical fish shows to marine shows to trade shows. We're kind of armchair aquarists, and we rarely get together for the greater good. And the Americans seem to be a lot better at doing that than us.
Well, sorry. I was going to say I'll be at Telford. I'm assuming you'll be at Telford as well this year.
Yeah, and it's the first year with a consumer event, which is great. And that's going to hopefully boost the hobby, or at least do something. But even then, there's a lot of arguments about where it should be, who should go, who's allowed, who's not allowed, blah, blah, blah. And you're just thinking, just get it on, and marine shows. We have marine shows in shops, but we need an event. We need a UK reefing show.
It's not the same. So there are loads of little reefing shops shows popping up lately. So Crackner the other day, Finest Fest I've seen before.
Fest, Finest Fest.
Loads of little
Coral
ones like
Freaks.
That.
Yeah.
Coral Freaks, yeah. Oh no, so Coral Freaks I think was a little bit different. To be fair, I've not been to these other ones, but
I didn't go to Coral Freaks.
No, okay. So there were sort of 500 odd people there. There were the two best YouTubers in the UK there, and Ryan was there as well. And that was really good. But I feel like when it's just at a shop, it's not the same. There's one at my local fish shop. They've done it a couple of times, Reef Keeper Moss End, and it's great. I'm not complaining. It's not the same as a full-on show. So Aqua Telford, which obviously I've never been to as a plebby consumer, that's going to be, I feel like that's quite big. Is it, you know, this is UK, big for the UK, by the way.
It's a big trade show. It's actually Europe's biggest aquatic only show. It's tiny compared with Interzoo, but if you class that everyone there, Interzoo's got cat, dog, guinea pig, hamster, snake. Aqua has just got aquatics. It's got a little bit of reptile. So it's actually, in terms of space, it's quite big. And it has the potential to have a lot of consumers turn up. I just hope they get it right. I'm an OATA member. I know the guys at OATA. I know the guys running the show. I just hope it's going to be good, because my fear is that people will go there expecting Aquashella. Do you know what I mean? Just the best aquatic consumer event. And there's going to be a lot of people in suits, like you said, in Interzoo, you know, trade people going, why are they here? I really don't want to be here. You know, when it should be a carnival, it should be an absolute celebration for keeping, you know, so. Fingers crossed.
I feel like that's because there is a demand for it, and Coral Freaks showed that there was something like 500 people there, probably more. I think the official Fire Egg said 500 people. Maybe there were more. I don't know. But either way, I think there's a demand for it. We're a bit more reluctant to travel in the UK, but Telf is not that far from most people.
It's not that far, but people still complain. You know, Northerners want it in the north, Southerners want it in the south. You know, the Scottish just feel left out, and the poor old Northern Irish. You know, we never go there. But
we're tight as well. So we don't like paying for tickets, and we don't like paying for travel. And
no, and I went to anything, there was a show that PFK was involved in probably 10 years ago called Aquatics Live, and they held it at Olympia. Did you go?
I was there.
Yeah. Most fish keepers are actually introverted, and they don't like going to the big city. It's that simple. You know, a lot of people are like.
On this show, we prefer to call them weirdos, not introverts.
Exactly.
So
you know, we're all like it, but people were like, "I'm not going to London. I won't feel comfortable there." Do you know what I mean? Literally. And just the location of it being in the middle of London, you know, tubes and all that sort of thing, put people off.
I got someone to drive me there. That's genuinely true. I just remembered.
Yeah.
I paid someone who had no interest in fish to drive me there and come round with me and then drive me home, because I'm like that. I don't leave the house that often.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we don't need to. But in Europe, they'll have like a discus show. I think it's because all the countries are joined together. But they'll have like a discus show that will have like 22,000 people turn up. That's unheard of, you know, for one species of fish. You know, koi shows the same. And marine shows, you know. I haven't been to. Did you go to Vivaria? No, I'd love to go. We should all go. I don't know when the next one is, but they just the Americans and Europeans, they tend to do it bigger and better, I think.
Yeah, I got invited to Interzoo last year, but it was really short notice. I think it was in Germany.
Yeah, it was rubbish last year. Yeah,
it was. Okay.
The best show in the world was rubbish because it was just after COVID. So lots of companies didn't want to go. It was still kind of, I really don't want to shake hands with 20,000 people who might have COVID. And it was still kind of like hot spots like Italy and Spain and that sort of thing. So like no Italians went. Then there was a flare up in Germany. So like no Germans went. It was a German show. And then the Chinese couldn't go because they'd have to quarantine. And it just absolutely kind of like shrunk it right down to nothing.
Okay.
A lot of the main companies didn't go, did they? I don't think Red Sea were there.
Red Sea didn't go. D&D didn't go. TMC didn't go. De Jong didn't go. And you know De Jong are famous for the amazing...
Yeah, the big tanks. Yeah.
But when De Jong didn't go, you're like, oh, you know, then Tunzi didn't go. It's just like a domino effect. Yeah. A few went, but it just wasn't the same.
There was a rumor I heard about one of the American shows. I can't remember. They're all slightly different, aren't they? Like Mac and Reefer Palooza. I think it was Reefer Palooza. We're talking of doing a show in Europe. It might not have been Reefer Palooza. So it would have been branded Reefer Palooza. And I feel like that would have made a difference. Because if you get invited to a show over here and it's called some name that someone's made up, it's not exciting. Whereas if as a UK reefer, if someone says, "Do you want to go to Reefer Palooza Manchester?" Yeah, I do.
I can share this with you guys, but I think it was before Jake died. We were talking about Reef Stock UK and definitely Reef Stock Europe. And because I was in the UK, they were like, yeah, Jeremy, man, you can go and check out the venues and you can do this. And I was like, great. And I was going to kind of, you know, surprise everyone with, because like you say, it's an event. And so if you say, do you want to go to Reef Stock in the UK, the reefers will be like, yeah, I'm really up for that. And you'd import like the American guys over as well. And you try and get that whole feel. I'm not sure what's happening with it now, because obviously it's different owners and stuff like that. But yeah, if Reefer Palooza or Aquashella could have an English show or a Macna or whatever, it would draw us all in, definitely.
I think that's because people know what they know what to expect.
Yeah.
Whereas, see, I've never been to Telford, so I know it's every 2 years, isn't it? Yeah. And I've been invited, but I just thought Telford's a bit far, and it's not. It's hardly Florida, is it?
You're the problem, right? It's people like you saying no.
What I'm saying is, like, I know what to expect when I go to Macna and Reef Palooza. I see all my like friends that you meet at previous shows, because all the weirdos are there at the same time, and then you'll go out in the evening. I can't imagine that. I mean, it might happen in Telford. I just don't know. But
I bet it would. I bet it would. So I'm up for Telford. I'm going. I bet it'll be awesome. I think you'll meet loads of people, and like, because it'll be easy for you and me, because people will be like, oh, you're that dickhead on YouTube, and then you can start up an easy conversation. So I think you'll meet loads of people. There'll be loads of brands who will be desperate to talk to you because you are an influencer, Ryan.
Not me. Maybe you, but
so I think it'll be wicked.
Yeah,
Jeremy will be there.
I hope so. It's I just hope it's got enough for the consumers. I want it to be amazing for them, and they're going to go there and want to spend money, and they're going to want to. The problem is they're going to want to buy fish, and it's not. Fish sales are not going to be allowed at the moment. Coral sales aren't even allowed. That's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Some shops obviously want coral sales. I think it's essential that if we send 1,000 reef keepers or 3,000 reef keepers to a show, they've got to be able to buy corals, because they're going to be disappointed if they can't.
Weren't you invited, Ryan, as a coral seller?
Yes, basically. But I didn't know this, so I'd be even more annoyed if I went down there and they said you can't sell these.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to happen, but it's still not confirmed.
That has to happen. As in, I won't go I won't take corals there because it's too much hassle for me. I'd rather go enjoy myself and you meet people that follow the channel and things like that. Whereas rather than standing behind the stand, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But like, I'm expecting to go there and see things I've never seen before. Even having been to all these shows and things like that, you still see things that you don't see.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone else is expecting. So
and I guess that's what happens in the American shows as well. You know, you go there and just see frag after frag after, you know.
It's not just that. People bring their best stuff. So you might see a bounce mushroom, which is $10,000 that no one's going to buy, but you were lucky enough to see it and you remember seeing it. I remember seeing a Frankenstein bounce mushroom, which you probably hate because it's got a name, that was like, it was like this, and the balls on it were huge, and I've never seen one like it since. They must have, but do you see how that created a memory that I am now remembering it 3 years later?
Yeah.
But I bet as well, you say people won't buy it. I bet those sorts of things, if someone's got a bit of cash, they're in the, like, get fired up. They're like, I've never seen that, I'm having it. I bet those things sell more often than not. And I bet the coral vendors make a lot of money. I think they should get, and I've said this before, when some people have asked me about what should be for input on what a coral show should be. And in my opinion, it needs Prestige Reef and Signature Frags there selling corals. I'm not taking the piss. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass.
Are you going to be the one that's selling them for me? So I
no, but this is the thing. So I know it's a hassle, but if you had Prestige Reef and Signature Frags turning up, and probably some other shops, some of the big shops around the UK. If it was in the Midlands, for example, and AAC turn up, you've got a load of Northerners who've never seen it before, but have heard about it, and they're like, I want it. Or a load of Southerners and Abyss turn up. That sort of thing. I think that needs to happen, because then that gets you up for it.
And again, I think Ryan will confirm, but that is what happens in the States, you know. What should be rivals are next to each other. You've got Worldwide next to Jason Fox, next to a mom and pop shop who was just growing a few zoas or whatever, next to Red Sea, next to, you know, it's just an event. Everyone's there.
No, I'm lucky enough to go, because I get a a press pass, so I get to go in an hour before everyone else. So there's like the press go in. I'm not press. I just have a phone and a little pass that says press pass. And then after that, you get the early people. So some people will pay to get an early ticket, so they can go around for the first hour by themselves to look at the corals. Now, during that hour, when only I'm not pressed, only the weird, YouTubers go in, all the other shops are looking at each other's stock and buying it. Yeah. They're buying it to grow themselves.
Yeah.
So now I've sold corals to Signature Frags, and Signature Frags have sold corals to me. And that's just how it works. There's people think that we're enemies, but I have no animosity towards him at all.
You should hear what he said about you this weekend.
Yeah. So actually, we need to talk about that, because you went to see my rival. So
I did. It was fantastic. I was really impressed, actually. I said earlier.
One thing I was
going to ask you though, Ryan, do you consider yourself a serious journalist?
Me? No. I don't consider myself a serious anything.
You're an influencer, definitely.
No.
Yeah, I agree. He's a right influencer.
When I can be bothered to put out a video, then some people might be influenced by things sometimes, but I don't see it like that. What I said to Alex this before, and Alex probably feels the same. You never realize how many people are actually watching the videos. You just see a number, and that number makes you feel something. Either you get 10,000 views and you're like, oh, that's nice, or you get 2,000 views and you're like, well, that was a waste of time. But you don't realize that these are actual people, do you?
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah.
So we went off on a tangent, didn't we?
But that's fine. But so and this was all around basically Aqua Telford. All right, but so that's going to happen. Ryan, what I'm hearing is you're going to be there selling corals.
No. I don't know. Why was there even hesitation? Definitely no. No,
why not? Why not? And I know that apparently it's not going to happen. But why wouldn't you do it?
Why wouldn't I? Because
you're selfish.
I'm actually, like, you know this already. I'm a reasonably anxious person. I don't leave the house that often. That's genuine, unless I go to America. And if I agreed now to have a tank there selling corals, I will worry about it from now until October or August when it is. And it's just not worth it for me to make maybe an extra £1,000 or whatever that day.
Yeah, it's a lot of hassle. It will be highly, it will be stressful for you. However, in the bigger picture, if everyone thinks like that, you know what I'm going to say. If everyone said, I would, but it's going to be hassle, no corals.
So in that case, what would it take to incentivize you to rock up?
If someone actually was the person selling the corals for me, then that would take a lot of. And I'm serious. If someone was there, like behind the stand, I don't have to deal with money. And
as in, like, you employ a member of staff. That's a great idea. Yeah,
because there's two reasons. Firstly, I don't get to go to these shows that often, and usually they are quite special events for me anyway. Even when you went to Coral Freaks and all the people that come and they talk to you, it's like you don't get to meet the people that watch your channel, do you? And you meet them all in the same place, and it's funny because they know everything about you and you know nothing about them. So that's one of the reasons why these shows are nice. And if I had a stand, I wouldn't be focused on going around enjoying myself. I'd be focused on trying to sell as much as I can, because I just put all
you could take someone like a day member of staff that you pay £100 or whatever.
Oh, is that your cost?
Sorry,
is that your cost?
I'm a lot.
Considering this is your idea.
No, you could not afford me. I don't get out of bed for less than 10 grand. But if you could find someone who would do it, and you pay him £100 or whatever it is to run the shop, and then you're there as a personality, which obviously you think you're a big deal. So you're there as but that would be brilliant. That would genuinely be really good. I like that. Let's do it.
Why are you trying to lure me into this?
Wouldn't that be great?
Look, as I said, it would be. It's a nice idea. It is a nice idea. I think, I don't know who you speak to, Jeremy, who is organizing the show, but they need to be told that people need to buy fish and coral.
I've told them.
because when I remember going to Macna or Reef Palooza, and you see frogfish that you don't see them in a shop. No, this big red one, huge, and all these different expensive angelfish and things that the average shop just doesn't get in because it sort of sits around for a while. And who's going to pay £300 for a red frogfish?
Yeah.
But someone will do it to show it off at this show. To go look at the fish that we get in, we get different stuff in. So
that's what you want to see. Like De Jong, when they go to Interzoo, they'll have like a pair of masked angels.
Yeah,
like
I know. Yeah,
€20,000, and you're like, you brought that, and then there'll be like a joculator angel, and you're like, oh, okay. Then there'll be like an interrupter angel, and then there'll be like, you know, the rarest stuff you've ever seen, and that's brilliant, and that stays with me. You know, I feel privileged to have seen them. It's just amazing. You know, and it makes me want to go again.
Yeah, they had I think it was 2018. It was the one before COVID was the one I went to. I don't know if it's the same tank they had every time, the big square one.
Yeah.
But I remember they said that one of the Antheus had jumped out, and it was like a £400 Antheus or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember what it was or the price. I just remember it was one of like the crazy expensive ones. And if that was for one fish, imagine how much the whole thing was.
Oh, it was hundreds of thousands of pounds.
And I bet you remember it was like a really big mushroom. It would like the rock was made like a mushroom, and it had sun corals on it, didn't it?
Yeah.
This is what the shows are about.
Exactly.
They're about showing people what they don't normally see and inspiring people.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think
as a nation, we're in danger of kind of undercooking it. Do you know what I mean? I just think if you want to really, really grow the hobby and invite thousands of people down there, it's got to be amazing. You've got to have the aquascapers have got to have an aquascaping comp. They've got to be able to buy plants, bogwood, shrimp. You know, the reefers have got to be able to buy frags and equipment, and you know, you name it, 3D printed stuff. You know, it's got to be something for everyone, because if it isn't, it won't happen the year after. You know, the 2 years after.
So I feel like this is obviously conversations that you must have had in the background, because all these are things. This isn't just things you're not just riffing. This is things that you've thought about. But I feel like this would work.
I talked to them about it. Yeah, I'm an art member, and I talked to them about it. And I've been to a lot of shoys, and I've been to shows in China and Interzoo. I haven't been to America, but you know, I want it to be amazing. And if it's
I've become more excited about this show from talking about it to you for all the things that might not happen. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
if we all go, it'll be great, you know.
But you know, that's the thing that gets people excited. Like if you get someone to sign up, so if you've got Prestige, let's say for the sake of argument, Prestige Reef and ideally Signature Frags is, you know, just Prestige Reef, you know. But if you've got those two to sign up suddenly and you announce it, everyone's like, oh, well, they're going. And then you might have other shops and they're more interested in, because if it's like, oh, you're going to Telford. But if you give someone an incentive, a reason to go, oh, okay. And suddenly it could spiral and you can get loads, but you need to get people on the hook. Otherwise, everyone is going to say the same as you, Prestige, and be like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I fancy it. And I asked Sean in a chat at Ocean Project, would you be up for it? And he said, if there's enough demand for it. And it's the same thing. You need, and it's like, well, maybe. Don't know if it's worth my while. It's the what's in it for me. So you need that for people to see what's in it for them.
I think that the show themselves also have to make it as easy as possible for the people that are coming, like the people that are the selling there, if that is what it is. So I believe at Reef Palooza, they have water already there in big tanks and Macta. So that's just supplied. So you just turn up. You don't have to bring any water. You bring boxes of coral.
Yeah.
I don't know if the tanks are supplied, although I think they might be. But I think obviously people book a thing in advance.
Yeah,
they pay for a slot, and then when they get there, the stand is how they've requested it, I believe. Yeah, because I've been there for the setup as well, and I don't remember people bringing their own tanks.
Yeah, definitely we need, you know, salt water there and drainage and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I spoke to Paul Hughes from AAC about it when he had Coral Freaks. The difference between us and America is that they have these portable frag tanks. And Alex, you were talking about Kessel lights. They take Kessel lights because you don't need the Wi-Fi. You just twiddle a knob because you've got 100 people fighting for Wi-Fi. Yeah, so just little things like that. And they bring these kind of you know, flat acrylic trays with the frags all mounted in. As a country, we're not used to that yet. So people were turning up at Coral Freaks going, well, where's my tank? And Paul's like, I haven't got you a tank. What, you want me to get you a tank? Right, okay, I'll get you a tank, you know. And it was
logistics is everything, isn't it? And if it's making it easy for people, because if I say to Ryan, you need to bring your farm up, he's gonna be like, whereas if I say I've got it all set up, just bring a few corals, get there an hour early.
I could do it relatively easy in terms of bringing the corals, because all my trays, literally, they all have those little plug things in them so the corals don't come out. I literally have to lift the tray out, put it into a plastic container and drive it up there and just prepare the corals the night before. So that isn't, and then just, why am I talking myself into this now? So in theory, it wouldn't be too hard. I think for me, it's more of the actual running the stand, which I'm not a shop. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I deal with people on a day-to-day basis, but it's one person at a time. It's not like 10 people standing around like waiting for you, if you see what I mean. And I've never worked in that industry either. I've never been a bartender, for example. So it's that fear for me more than anything else.
But you need someone to do all that thinking for you and say, this is how it's going to work.
Yeah.
So you can picture it exactly. Like, I'm sure you've been the same. I've been invited to a couple of like small shop style coral shows, and they're like, do you want to come along? And that's it. That's the end of the question. And I'm like, well, is it a meet and greet? Do you want me to talk? Am I just there, to stand in the corner? What is it? What am I doing? And it's the same with that. You need to be saying, Ryan, can you come along? This is how it's going to work. This is what we've got. This is what we want you to do. So all you've got to do is rock up, and then people come along.
Yeah.
Well,
make it happen, Jeremy.
Yeah, make it happen, Jeremy.
I spoke to Radical Reefs recently, and he's looking at putting on a bigger show in Leeds. And again, I kind of not advised him. I'm not an advisor, but I said, it needs to be a venue like they have in the States. And he found this one at Ellen Road football stadium, where it's like a big venue, carpets, and you can just imagine it like Macna, kind of big open space, and you'll have booths and vendors and that sort of thing. And I think 3,000 people can go there. But I said, get an event organizer, because that's the next level. You're a shop guy and you get an event, and we got one in, and she turned up and she said, right, your tickets are going to be here, your security is going to be here, your seminars are going to be here. Do you know what I mean? So that's when they would approach you guys and go, all right, Alex, we want you here from 10 till 4. You will be meet and greet. You'll do a seminar at 1. Then you'll do this. Do you know what I mean? And then it's just more organized.
If you approach me with that, I'm much more likely to say yes. Whereas if you're making it hard for me and I've got to do my own thinking, but like event organizers, even with that, so AAC haven't done Coral Freaks again because it was so difficult. Because actually, there's a million things you don't think about, and they're a shop; they're not an events organizer, so it's new.
Agreed. Yeah, I know Paul quite well, and he said it was a lot of hassle and expensive. And I'm sure it was. All right.
Well, look, I think we've done what we can with that, and Ryan's going to go along, which is great to hear. So that's good. And what else I was going to say is, you mentioned earlier, you said, "Oh, I can tell you this." What behind the scenes stuff can you tell us, Jeremy? It's got to be
me. I was waiting for Ryan to give me some behind the scenes.
What's the goss?
Exactly. What's the goss? Come
on. Let me think. Can't talk about the Hawaiian tangs yet, can I? No.
Yeah, no, you can. I think that's okay, actually.
What?
What else? Yeah, no, that is okay. That's fine.
I spoke to someone a couple of days ago, because I thought that the ban was lifted, and then they've like appealed the appeal, haven't they? So that it's just been frozen. Is that correct?
It's constantly met with a rebuttal by the opposing team. So then where they are now is that they can now apply for fishing licenses. So there was a court case to prevent fishing licenses being issued. So they were kind of blocked. And the lengthy court case has now had that lifted. And then a super quick court case came in to try and ban the whole of fishing in Hawaii.
Yeah.
It's just a very lengthy, expensive process. And now they can go to the people who provide the quota. So they've said, right, you're allowed, 200,000 yellow tangs across the whole of Hawaii for 2024. And there's 8 of you who are allowed licenses. So 8 of you divide up 200,000, and that will be the world supply. But they've got to apply for that. So that's the next step. But they're constantly met by legal challenges at every step of the way.
Who's behind? Why do people want it to be banned? What's wrong with because it's not like the Zebrasoma flavescens is about to go extinct. What's the problem?
It's actually one of the best managed fisheries in the world.
And, that is, yeah.
People have taken yellow tangs from Hawaii for 50 years, and they're still there. And
probably eat more than we keep in our tanks. So
in many cases, there's more of them. So it's a kind of a double thing. So there's the rights of the native Hawaiians to say, I don't want my local fish stocks plundered. I definitely don't want them leaving the US and going around the world. And it's my multi-generational Hawaiian indigenous person's right to be able to fish them and eat them, and it's my land. So that's half of the battle. The other is a legal representation from a kind of an animal rights, a kind of a PETA type organization who are just going, we don't want any wildlife taken anywhere, especially as pets. And so you've got this kind of double thing. You've got the people who live there going, I really don't want them going elsewhere. It's my native right to have them and fish them and eat them, even though, you know, you can eat them, but you can't put it in a tank. Versus us, the pet trade, going, we fished it for 50 years. They're still there. There's 20 world-renowned scientists who will stand up and say they're still there. And in fact, there's slightly more. And we would like the right to be able to fish them. And like all conservation, when you put a price on something, it helps to protect it. It's a cliche, but it's true. It's when they're not worth anything that then stuff gets trashed, like coral reefs. So we're saying we'll pay you $10 for a yellow tang that another guy will pay $1 to eat. Why don't you take the $10 off us? But we don't want to eat it. Do what you want with it, and then we'll put it into the pet trade.
So does that effectively, if it's going to the pet trade, does it put the price of barbecue tangs up then? Is that
we pay a lot more than it costs to eat. So,
but what I mean is, if suddenly the pet trade is saying, well, I'll give you $10 for a yellow tang, and the shops are saying, I'll give you $1 for a supermarket, the person who's collecting them is going to say, well, bollocks to that, I'll sell it to Jeremy for a tenner.
Yeah. Well,
so does that then push? Is that
It should be a no-brainer to sell it for more money, but it's weird because, you know, the whole time that Hawaii's been off, you know, no yellow tangs, you know, you see these. Someone will catch like 200 Achilles tangs and barbecue them, and you're just like, but you just said that we were depleting the numbers, and now you're eating 200 of them. So your argument's gone. You know, it's.
Plus, they're sitting on like the fish version of Bitcoin, because in the old days we would have paid them $10. We'll pay them like $200 now because people will pay whatever they will. They've realised that people will pay £300 at one point for a yellow tang.
Correct. Yeah, so unfortunately, we probably will end up paying a lot more. We've got to pay for the court case, and air freight costs more, and in global inflation. So I say $10, it's probably going to be a lot more. And the indications that I've been given is they may even end up with a retail price as much as the biota ones in the UK, which is about 200 quid.
Yeah.
You know, the first yellow tang I bought in 1999 was 30 quid.
Yeah, that was the same as mine. Do we need wild caught yellow tangs anymore? Because you still see them around, and yes, they're more expensive, but it's not like they're gone. Like, I can't get a black tang at the moment. I want one. It's the last Zebrasoma, which I don't have. There is one at Abyss, which is like $3,000, which is ridiculous. And it's massive. But yellow tangs are still around. Someone should start breeding black tangs.
Yeah, there's the case for all these fish to be bred. I mean, De Jong, like we were saying, De Jong's just started breeding a load because we have to kind of de-risk the fact that one day, because of the state of the oceans, someone might just shut the whole thing down, you know, and then we will literally be reliant on the species we've bred. Like we don't even see captive bred regal tangs. What's going to happen there? You know, someone needs to start captive breeding regal tangs, because if a ban comes in, they're gone. You know,
what happened? Because there was captive bred yellow tangs in the UK, and then they disappeared. What happened with that?
Yeah, they're still available from biota, but they're expensive. They were see-through when they came through. And I don't think, you know, I will go on record, I don't think they're as yellow, or the hobbyists are not giving them the vitamins that they need that the hatchery can give them.
They do colour up after a while, it just takes a long time. And people were like, if you have a choice of a nice vibrant yellow one or a pale one, you're going to pick the vibrant one every time. But going back to what you said a minute ago, I think that I don't know this for sure. It's a spiritual thing as well for the Hawaiian natives. You can't even take a rock from Hawaii. And you literally, if you take a rock, there's an address that you can send it back to, because that's what it's like in Hawaii, I believe.
Yeah,
it's interesting. That you can't really argue with, can you?
It's interesting what you say there, Ryan, because I watched the court case, and some of the native Hawaiians said, I'll stand at the top of the sacred mountain and look down to the seas, and I need to be able to see the yellow tangs and all that sort of thing. So it is all that kind of, goes back a long way. And that's, I wouldn't want people taking, I don't know, foxes or otters or whatever from my kind of, you just
hate foxes. Ryan, you're on mute, mate. Oh, well, so the red squirrel. Because so over in the UK, so red squirrels were indigenous here, and now we have instead what my dad calls American tree rats, grey squirrels.
Yeah.
And if you started exporting the last of the red squirrels, I wouldn't like that. So it's the same sort of thing, I guess. And I think that there's a bit more of a big deal for that sort of thing in Hawaii for whatever reason. So I get that. I think, and it's hard to argue that. Like, mate, I want a yellow fish in my tank that eats algae.
Correct.
It's a crap argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. What else can you tell us behind the scenes stuff? What's going on that we don't know about?
Let me think. There's probably loads. There's always a lot of politics going on. Always.
Yeah.
A lot of kind of.
I'd like to stay away from that, and so I've only started discovering politics of the hobby in the last year or so. As I talk to more and more people, and I was so ignorant of it before, and I liked that. Because my vision of the hobby up until a year or two ago was that everybody's great. It's a small hobby. We all love each other. Like if you see someone who with a blue glow in their window, you'll stop your car and you go and talk to them. And so I like that. I like that it's and there are lots of people who are still, that's all they're interested in. And I love that.
Yeah. And that's a good way to try and stay. But unfortunately, because you're growing in popularity and power and getting more into it, you will come into these things like products. Manufacturers will say, I want you to cover this product, and then you've got politics about that, or they'll say, I don't want you to cover my competitor's product, or why did you say that about my product, Alex? Because it's brilliant. And you'll go, well, I was just being honest. And they'll say, well, maybe I don't want to do this with you again in the future. And you're like, here we go.
Do you know what? So do you know what? I've never had that, and I've never had. And this, so you're the other side of this. No one's ever approached me and said, "Will you make a video? You've got to say, you've got to be nice about it," or anything. They might be thinking that, but no one's ever said that. It from the other side, as a distributor or behind the scenes, is there kind of an expectation when you approach someone that you're giving something free that they'll do a certain thing?
Yeah, and from the journalistic point of view as well. Of
course,
you're well known. So if you said the latest roller filter, if you publicly said to your fans, this didn't work, it went wrong twice, I sent it back, I did this, not good for them.
See, this is the thing. It's sometimes hard, particularly on this live stream. This to me feels like we're just having a chat, but actually there's 200 people watching. And there's normally 4,000 or 5,000 people after. That's actually quite a big audience, but it feels really informal. And so Ryan and we talk about this from time to time. We're quite conscious of that. It's hard to see it sometimes, but we often think, I don't want to say something negative about a product that you might moan to your mate down the pub about, because some people will be like, he said that means it's gospel, and there's more to it than that. So I get the fear with that.
It's also unfair as well, because let's say there's a product which we had difficult setting up. That might be us being idiots. Do you see what I mean? So just because we found it difficult doesn't mean everyone finds it difficult. Yeah.
I think, when I used to do reviews at PFK and stuff like that, I think it's important to give a balanced review. It's very rare that any new product is flawless. And I think you have a duty sometimes to point out something and balance it. It could be 90% amazing, but there might just be one thing that you could think. And what gets me is that when I've said bad things about products before and companies have gone crazy, and then I've said to them, but if you change that flaw that I pointed out in the next 12 months, you're admitting that that was a flaw. And they all do. You know, that's why you get Gen 2, Gen 3 very quickly. And I'm going, you knew that. You know, you gave me a really hard time about that. But straight away, because it's not just me, I could leave the industry tomorrow and they could sell 100,000 protein skimmers. But someone's going to go, well, it broke in my hand. And then the next person will go, well, it broke in my hand. You know, they knew it was a problem.
Do you tell them, or did you tell them before you put out the article? Did you warn them going, look, just so you know, this is coming?
Yeah. So in publishing, you need to give, if you don't want to get sued, you need to give a right to reply, or you used to. Problem is you give them a right to reply and they'll say, don't feature it. And then you go, well, I've got no product. So you
See, I didn't know that.
You have to be a bit naughty and you have to just publish it. You have to just publish it, because if you say, I'm going to say something bad about your product, they'll go, whoop, take it away. No,
so I've sometimes thought about that. What there was one thing I thought about. Oh, it was Vibrant. So you know the whole Vibrant scandal that kicked off. I did a live stream about that because no one was really talking about it, and I felt like people needed to know, or certainly in the UK. And that did cross my mind, but I just thought, you know what? I'm not going to say anything that's not true. I'm going to be fair and balanced, as you said, you talked about earlier. And I think the way I see it is, as long as I'm being fair, I'm not saying something that's untrue, and I'm explaining both sides of the story, I feel like I'm all right. Legally, who knows? And also, I feel like if I got a legal threat and someone said, we're going to sue you for that, I think that's suicide, because the next thing I'm going to do, this company is suing me, clickbait thumbnail, and I'm going to tell people what's genuinely happening, and that's not going to go down well. So I feel like that's unlikely. I mean, whether I'd
like
a
mafia boss.
I know, whether I'd actually do that is another matter, but that's like my thought process.
Yeah, telling the truth definitely helps, and there's even a legal defense called fair comment. So there's all these different defenses. If it went to court and you could say, I tried this product and it didn't work, you're not lying, and for you it didn't work. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that you can say that. You can say, I went to open my bedroom door and the handle fell off in my hand. You know, that was true. You know, it's not you defaming them. It's not you going, you know, every door handle you ever touch is going to fall off. It's just that for you it happened. But I always liken it to car reviews. If you guys are going to buy a car or watch Top Gear or whatever, you need to know the bad bits as well as the good bits. You know, no product is perfect. And we used to take this really kind of harsh view when I was at PFK that just because it's new, it doesn't make it great, you know. And we'd even sit there saying all products are bad until proven otherwise. That harsh, that kind of straight up, because it's shiny and it's in a box, and we do the unboxing, we go, hey, that protein skimmer's brilliant. Well, compare it to 10 others in that market. Do a proper comparison. Is it better than the skimmer next to it by the other brand, or is it just, are you just excited because it's turned up on your doorstep? You know, someone needs to drill. We're losing that as a culture in aquatic as well, that we're not doing proper balanced reviews. We're not saying, what about this one? You know, this is a great protein skimmer, but it's 500 quid. You know, this is a great protein skimmer, but it's 300 quid. Or when I was at PFK, people would send me £2,000 lights, and I'd go, it's amazing. And people would write in going, I haven't got £2,000 for a light. I'm an ordinary fish keeper. You know, you get into this bubble.
But I feel like with that, the answer is that, so if you get sent a £2,000 light that is absolutely fantastic, the answer is, if you've got £2,000 to spend on a light, get that. It's amazing. Yeah. But that's not, if you haven't and you've got £1,000, it's not for you. Don't go and break out the credit card. It's just
you get to keep it.
But a product isn't made for everybody. And if I get sent a product, most manufacturers will say, like, if it's expensive, and I say, I'm going to say this is expensive because it is expensive. They know that. They're not stupid. They're not aiming for the budget end of the market. So that sort of thing shouldn't come as a surprise. But anyway, we're getting to the point. So I'd normally wrap it up in about 2 hours. I feel like we've actually just got started, and we could go for another hour or so. But that would push us into midnight. So was there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we do wrap it up, though, Jeremy?
I don't think so. No, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me on, guys. It's I don't normally do much on a Sunday. It's normally my one day off, and I'll do a water change if that. and then watch like Antiques Roadshow. So it's certainly been a different kind of use of my time. So it was really useful, and hopefully we've had a good chat and the informality was good, and hopefully people have not learned but listened, and
yeah, I've loved it. I've had a really good time. It's been brilliant, and you've been a fantastic guest. I've not caught up with the chat. I've seen some of it. There's been loads of interaction, and it's just been really good to have you on. So cool. Thank you for coming on. And go on, Ryan. What
I was going to say, I got obviously to experience both sides of it. I got to watch it first, and I was like, it's really interesting, because I knew of you, but I've never actually listened to you, if you see what I mean. Don't worry, I don't watch Alex either. So, and when I was listening to it in the background, I was like, this is actually really interesting. Then you got onto equipment and you completely lost me. So I was like, right, I need to go on there to save everyone from talking about equipment.
Yeah. And we end up talking about equipment. So, all right.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for watching. And I will catch you all next week. Bye, guys.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.